All right, my friends, this is the project we're going to be working on. It has a clever name. It's called Christmas Boot. And so this was the Halloween Addicts Anonymous project for May 2024. So this is what it should look like by the end of the video. This is what it should look like at the start of the video. There's quite a lot of prep. And rather than have you watch me base things in, I thought I would just go ahead and do the prep that was given out for you to be able to paint along with me on the Facebook Live. And the reason I had you do so much prep is because there are a lot of little things to do on this piece, and you wanted to do it, so I wanted you to be able to get finished or as close to finished as you could. So on your prep sheet, it would have told you to base your candy cane in white and then base the stripes in country red. The gingerbread man is based in sable brown. We have an Irish moss Christmas tree with a moon yellow star. There is the cuff on the boot is painted with warm white. And then I went ahead and used this is awfully dirty, but a 1/4-inch stripe stencil, which I have available on my website, or you can use one, whatever one you want. It can be bigger, it can be smaller. And I painted alternating stripes of Irish moss and country red. All right, so I put on the pattern, the line drawing, the different names of the sections. I actually looked up the anatomy of a boot so that I could kind of figure out what this was actually called. And so from what I could figure out, this portion of the boot is called the main shank, and that's going to be based in with country red. This is called the heel counter. That's based with Blue Haven. This is the heel base and the sole. Those are based in graphite. This is the shank, and we based it in moon yellow. There's a little Blue Haven stripe right above the shank, and then you paint the toe with warm white. The tongue, I'm considering these little green triangles to be the tongue. Those were based in Irish moss. And then I based in the zigzag that trims the tongue with Blue Haven. And then you can use your Chris's Bubble Buddy stencil, or you can just paint in the eyelets. And I painted them in completely with lamp black. And once those were dry, then I came in and I painted the laces with warm white, and you can see they go to the center of the eyelets. Then you want to put your pattern on, the pattern for the ginger's face and buttons and his arms, the separations in the tree. I did not put the pattern on for the holly and berries yet because I want to do some work on the cuff first. You want to just put circles on the main shaft for where the snowman heads are going to go. And then on the heel counter, we're going to line some stripes first, little thin stripes, no stencil for that. And then we are going to use a snowflake stencil to stencil some snowflakes on top of that. On the toe, we are going to use a Harlequin stencil, which we've used before, and we're going to do that with Irish moss. And then down here we're going to use Chris's Floral Friend, and we're going to stencil some leaves and some flowers on this section. So This piece is all ready to go, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. We are going to start working on the candy cane first. So you're going to want to get out 3 colors, warm white, burnt umber, and cranberry wine. Alright, so one of the first things I'm going to do on this candy cane is I'm going to dry brush highlighting through the center of the candy cane across all the stripes, and I'm going to do that with warm white. So you want to get out your brush that you like to dry brush with and get it loaded with some warm white. Dry brush, no water, okay? And I'm going to start in the white section just in case I have a little too much paint on my brush. And I'm just going to dry brush this highlight through the center of that candy cane. It's always a good idea, especially with candy canes, to get that red painted on there and to let it sit for a little bit, like longer than a couple hours. Otherwise, it's not cured, and as you dry brush color on it, it's going to pick up, your brush is going to pick up some of the red, and you'll end up dry brushing pink all over. So we're just going to dry brush. And now we also can go to the cuff, and we can also dry brush highlighting across all the stripes through the center area of the cuff with warm white. And what we'll probably do is we'll bounce around a little bit, just as long as we have paint in our brush that we're using. We'll go ahead and use it in as many places as we can. So I'm just going to going across all those stripes. And this is why I didn't put the holly on, because I knew I was going to be doing this, and it would be just easier to do if I didn't have that holly on there. Okay, let's see, is there any place else? I think we can probably pick up a couple other places. We can dry brush highlighting on this blue part of the tongue, the trim on the tongue, with warm white. I'm sure I'll forget something, but so you just want to dry brush a little through the center of that zigzag. And we can also dry brush highlighting through this heel. I think I'm going to get a larger dry brush. We're going to dry brush on this blue part of the heel, and we also are going to dry brush through this shank and through that blue stripe, this blue stripe here. And we'll go ahead and dry brush. Now I'm just going to dry brush, scrub this color all over. I want to really break up that blue a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with this part that we're calling the shank. So I think we've got as much dry brushing as we can get done with our warm white, so you can go ahead and wash out your brush. So now we will go back to where we started originally, which was our candy cane. And we are going to float shading, let me get a little closer for you, around every side of that candy cane with some very well blended out cranberry wine. And when I talk about blending something out really well, what I want you to do is corner load like you normally do. And then normally we blend in one line. But when I want to soften that, I walk away from that. So I'm leaving a little bit more color on my palette. So it's a little bit of a softer float. So I'm going to float on all edges, and I'm not doing a very good job. Okay, I'm going to try this again. Okay, there we go. And our candy cane's going to turn kind of pink. And I'm going to turn this guy over. I apologize in advance for when I get off camera. I can guarantee that that's going to happen. It's just something I do. Okay, and I like to use a mop brush to soften my floats. So that helps even more to soften that float, and along with the blending it out really well. So both sides. You want to get down in here a little bit. It's not going to show up a whole lot down in this bottom area, but you still want to put it there. And you do want to go around the little ginger's hand. Okay, so while we let that float dry, let's go over to let's see, we're going to float shading at the top and bottom of each of those red stripes on the cuff with cranberry wine. That doesn't have to be blended out quite as much. So just go across the bottom. I do use quite a few stencils on this piece, but boy, they make it easy and a little quicker. And I'm going to go across the top of those red stripes. And that would include going right under that little ginger's hand. All right. So now we can float shading on our candy cane one more time. This time we're going to do it with very well blended out burnt umber. Normally I do like a blue, but on this piece I did it with burnt umber just because I wanted to look a little bit more aged or vintagey. You know, it's one of those old candy canes you've had around for a couple years. It never got eaten, so you keep putting it back in a stocking. So I'm just going to do, and it's a very soft float. You don't want it to be a line of brown. You just want it to be like a tint of brown. So again, I'm going to turn this over so I can get down here. I'm going to go right next to the ginger and around the top the other way. And then I want to do the inside edge. It's a little awkward shape, so it's kind of hard to keep it in the right place here. All right. Now there is a lined highlight on this candy cane, and that's done with just straight warm white. You can thin it down a little bit if you need to, and that sits just above center or off center a little bit. So I go up the front side of the candy cane and then down the back side, just a little off center. And it kind of breaks when you get to the hang hole. All right, look at that. We already have one section done. Amazing. So the next thing I want to work on is this tree. The tree was painted in Irish moss, and the star was painted in moon yellow. So I am going to get out some margarita, and I also want to get out black forest green, and we are going to, first we're going to dry brush highlighting on each of those sections with the margarita. So margarita highlighting on the tree, just through each of those sections. So just scrub that lighter color, like through the center of each of those sections. Okay, one more little section. And as long as we have margarita on our brush and we're dry brushing, we might as well go ahead and dry brush some highlighting on these green triangles. And you know, they're kind of small, but you can get a little bit of highlight scrubbed in there. All right. So I think that's going to do that for now. We'll go back to our tree. And we're going to float some shading on our tree, and we're going to do that with black forest green. This is a nice transparent color. But again, you still want to blend it out nicely so that it's not just a dark line. And what I want to do first is I'm going to float shading under the star. So kind of the top of the tree. I want to go under each of those sections. And there is like an extra section in here. There's no little notch for it, but so while we let that dry, what we can do is we can go back to our green stripes and float black forest green in the top and the bottom of the green stripes. Did I say strokes? Stripes. This one you want to go around his little hand a little bit. And let's do the bottom of those stripes. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to come down the sides of the tree with this shading. So that means we're going to go down the sides. We're also going to go next to the gingerbread man. I'm going to start at the top and pull down on each of those sections to shade the sides. And then I'm also going to go next to my gingerbread guy. And also across the bottom of that tree. I'm going to mop that a little bit to soften it. And then I want to do the other side also. All right. Looks pretty good. All right, so now I'm going to use my flat brush. This is a 1/2 inch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stroke on the lighter sections, like the branches of this tree, with Margarita. I'm going to start at the bottom here, and it's kind of a dry brush, so don't add any water to your paint. So I just want to, it's easier for me if I pull from the bottom up. So if it gets a little dry brushy looking, that's what you want. And it doesn't have to go all the way up to the division, to the where we shaded. Just a quick and easy way to give your tree some texture and the look of having different layers of branches. It's like with everything else. I can't just leave it alone. I can't just paint it and shade it and highlight it. I have to do something different to it. And now what you want to do is you want to, your brush still has Margarita in it. You want to pick up just a little warm white. And you're going to stroke on the lightest tips of the tree branches that we just did. So I'm not going to worry too much about the ones that are tucked into the boot. I'm going to start out here. And you see how nice that brightens that up? Okay. Makes those branches stand out just a little bit more. All right. So now what I want to do is I want this to dry because I really want to come back in and float this shading next to my gingerbread again. So while I let that dry, I'm going to go over to the tongue again, and I'm going to float shading. Let me look at my piece. Basically, it's every edge. So we're going to do that with black forest green. So what I'll probably do is work one side and then the other. So I'm going to go next to my laces first. And then I can turn this over or sideways and do the other side of the lace. And I'm going to look at this really close. I did. Just wanted to make sure what I was telling you was true. I want to make sure I shade next to the yellow shank. And now I can do the triangle parts, the diagonal parts. So it fills it up pretty good, but you can still see a little bit of that Irish moss and margarita there. All right. Slowly but surely, I'm glad I didn't put any more laces on this. And then we do want to do the front edge. Oops, you didn't get to see me do that last one. One where I got green on the laces. But I do want to come down the front edge of the green also. Okay. I think we can go back to our tree and refloat this area right here just to reinforce it and to kind of tuck it behind the gingerbread just a little bit more. I didn't get enough water out of my brush. I got lots and lots of color. That never happens to you though, right? And again, I'm going to mop this out and soften it a little bit. Okay, so this tree has some lights on it, and I only put the pattern for this string on, but you can line the strings with thinned burnt umber. Now, of course, we line highlighting on them, so you don't want to make them teeny tiny. You want to make them big enough that you can line a highlight on them. And now I don't want to go to the trouble of putting the pattern on, so I'm just going to sketch it on here with my chalk pencil. And if it's not exactly the same as the pattern, it'll be okay. Nobody will know once I get done. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and line those lines, those strings, with burnt umber. Okay. Halfway done. All right. Now we are going to, we're going to line that highlight on them. You don't have to wash your brush out. You can just wipe it out, pick up some warm white. And basically I'm going to keep that highlight through the center area of the tree. So it's just lining some warm white with a little touch of burnt umber. Just to highlight that a little bit. And then as we get colors out onto our palette, we can add some little lights. In the packet, I tell you that I used Country Red, Blue Haven, Moon Yellow, and Spiced Pumpkin, which I don't have any of those colors out yet, so I'm not gonna do them until I get those colors out. Now the star, we're just going to float a highlight in the top of the star with warm white and float shading in the bottom of the star with burnt umber. So just a regular side load float. It's such a large star. So I'm just going to go across the top of the star, top of the scar, with warm white. And then I'm going to turn this to the side, and I'm going to float some very well blended out burnt umber in the bottom of that star. So like in those two little points. All right, star's done. So we are going to just pop on over to that cuff again. And the cuff gets shaded around all four sides with some very well blended out burnt umber. So I'm going to go down the sides. Let's see. There's my mop. There it is. Soften that just a little bit. It's going to be all four sides in any order you want. So I'm going to go across the bottom of these scallops. And then I need to go across the top edge and around the ginger's arm. Okay, just around the ginger's arm, and that shading will be done. Let's just soften it all a little bit. So let's go to our gingerbread man. Let's go ahead and stipple all over our gingerbread man. We're going to need some honey brown out. And we're also going to need some moon yellow. So since we're getting out moon yellow, we can add a few yellow lights to our tree. I'm going to go ahead and use just the back end of one of my brushes, and I'm going to add like 4 or 5 yellow dots to act as lights on my tree. And then as I add more colors to my palette, I'll add more colors to the tree. Now you just have to remember to keep your hands out of it. So I want to stipple all over my my gingerbread man with honey brown. And I'm just giving it some texture, like it's a cookie. So, and it does go all over, all the way to the edge. If you wanted to put tape or a Post-it note across the bottom here to keep you out of the cuff, that might be a nice idea. And this dries and it doesn't hardly show at all until we get the next layer on. Again, stay out of those little dots. So just wipe that brush out that you used to stipple with, and pick up a little moon yellow. And let's go ahead and stipple some brighter color onto our gingerbread. This isn't going to go all the way to the edges. It's going to stay more center. You want it to be very light. Going to go around his head and between his eyes. All right. Now he's looking good. And you can go ahead and wash your brush out. Now what we need to do is we need to float shading on our gingerbread with burnt umber. So I'm going to float shading on basically every edge. So I'm going to start at the top of his head without getting my hands in my dots over there. I'm going to come down and around his head. And then I'm going to come around the front of his body that's up against the candy cane. I'm going to go ahead and turn this guy over. I'm going to float right in the crook of his arm here with burnt umber. And then I also want to do the other side of his head. And come around to the top. Let's do his arm. I'll go ahead and do the back side of his arm, and then I'll come back and do the front side. I want to do the back side of his arm up to his neck. We've got his other arm and his hand. So I want, and it's a little triangle area that's eventually going to get all filled in with burnt umber, but I want to go next to his body. And I'm going to do the back side of his hand. Let's go ahead and do across the bottom of his body next to the boot, the cuff. I'm going to go ahead and go and do the front side of his arm. And then I have just one little place to do, and that's on his hand, where his hand kind of wraps around the candy cane there. You want to touch just a little bit of shading in there to make it look like it's curved around the candy cane. And then across the top of this back arm. Now we're going to go ahead and float a highlight on the tip of this hand where with honey brown. So I'm going to turn him over. I'm sorry if I'm making you dizzy. I just want to lighten up the front of that hand a little bit. Okay, he's looking pretty good already. So now you get to line the icing on your gingerbread man with warm white. And it's your gingerbread. You ice him however you want, but just pay attention. He doesn't get icing across the bottom of his body here, okay? You don't want to do that. He's going to get it on his hand here. And then across the top of that back arm. Let's do on this arm. Let's do the front of his body. And then we just need to go around his head. I'm going to still trying not to get into those. I think I'll turn this over just to make it easy. So I'm just going to go all the way around his head. And I kind of squiggle it. And it gets thick and thin. Because I'm not a very good icing person. All right, he's looking like a gingerbread. He's got a couple of little cheeks, so we're going to need to get out just a touch of country red. And while you're at it, go ahead and get out lamp black. So we have some little cheeks that are going to be put on with country red plus warm white, so you get yourself a nice kind of pinky color. Just a little bit of country red and a little bit of warm white, so you get a nice pink. If you want to dry brush them on, you can. That's what I'm going to do. You can wash them on, however you like to do cheeks. So just a couple little cheeks. Because every gingerbread I know has cheeks. And here again you have a color out that you can use for your lights. So I am going to add a few red lights to my tree. Probably should use one more. It doesn't really matter where I put them. All right, so now you have red dots to keep your hands out of. We want to go ahead and paint in the eyes, line the mouth, and paint the buttons in with lamp black. So just nice little oval eyes. Okay. I must not have had too much caffeine today, because I did that pretty well. I'm going to give him his little mouth. It's just a line. And I always like to add like little stirrups at the corners of his mouth. And then he has a couple little buttons. Okay, cool. There's a little stroke in the bottom of each eye. I'll go a little closer, or a lot closer. And that's with Moody Blue, so you want to get out some Moody Blue. Now, if you wanted to put blue lights on your tree, you could go ahead and do that with Moody Blue. I think I used Blue Haven, but either one will work. So I just want to paint a little like crescent shaped stroke in the bottom of each eye without getting my hands in my red dots. And here's the deal. That's pretty bad looking, but it's okay because I can fix it with black paint really easily. Okay, so now I want to make that look more like I went in there and did a real stroke. So I'm just going to fix it with some black paint. Clean it up. So there's a little shadow that I'm going to line above each eye and to the right side of each button. And I'm going to do that with my liner brush. And I'm just going to make a little wash. I'm just going to thin down some burnt umber. And I think I'll do this upside down just so I stand a better chance of not getting in that red paint. So I'm just going to line that shadow above each eye. It sits right on top of the eye. And then to the right side of those buttons, just to sink them into his body a little bit. All right, so we are going to also line highlight in the eyes and in the buttons, okay? And that's going to be with warm white. So the first thing I want to do is I want to line a highlight just in the center of that blue stripe, that blue stroke that we put in his eyes. And then I'm going to come back and I'm just going to add a little dot of a highlight in the very top of each eye and a little dot of a highlight on each button that goes in the upper left side. So there you go, your little gingerbread is done. So there are holly and berries on this piece. They're on the cuff, and you can just wing it where you want to put them. I'm going to use this Chris's Holly Helper stencil. I'm going to use this largest leaf. And for the berries, these berries on here were too small for me. So I'm going to go ahead and use Chris's Bubble Buddy and add a little bit larger berry on there. So first thing we want to do is we want to stencil. You can stencil or paint the berries on with Irish moss. I mean the leaves on with Irish moss. So I'm just gonna put them, I'm gonna back up a little bit, and I'm just gonna put it however I want to do it. Gonna, the pattern is there, but it's just a suggestion. So I'm gonna do this leaf with Irish moss. I'm going to stencil it on, and the stripes are going to show through, but a little bit, but it'll be okay because we're going to put a lot of stuff on top of this. Well, the stripes are going to show through a lot. Let's put it that way. But I'm okay with that. And then I want to add the second leaf on there. Okay. So easy, quick holly leaves. Go ahead and wash out your stencil brush. We're going to let those dry because we need to dry brush some shade highlighting and float some highlighting and float some shading. So the next thing we want to work on is, let's get out some we have our Moody Blue out, so we can go ahead and float shading on this the zigzag front of this, and I'm just going to do it top and next to the eyelet. Okay, and that's with Moody Blue. So what I'll probably do is work one side again first. And I also want to do like a back-to-back float at the points. So I'm going to go one side, and then I'm going to go around my eyelet. and around the eyelet. All right, and as long as we're using Moody Blue to float shading, let's go ahead and float on this blue stripe too. This one I'm going to do top and bottom first, and then I'll come back and do the long sides of that stripe. So now I can do the rest of the zigzag. Doesn't really take that long. But it makes a difference. And then the laces, they get shaded front and back with Moody Blue also. So just pop a little shading on that front edge of each lace. And then flip it over and pop shading in the back where it goes into the eyelet. So what I want to do now too is I want to take my liner brush and I want to thin down some Moody Blue, and I'm going to line a shadow behind each eyelet just to reinforce, just like we did above the eyes and on the buttons of the gingerbread. So I'm just going to line this little, kind of like a C-stroke, behind each eyelet. And then we want to line a little highlight, a warm white, on the back side of the eyelet. It's on the eyelet, but it's in this back side. And it's a little line or a little stroke if you're that talented. Okay? So there, we've got that front edge done now. So let's go back to our holly. And we need to dry brush a little highlighting on the holly leaves with Moon Yellow, which you have out on your palette. And basically I'm just going to dry brush all over. And yes, you can still see those stripes through there. It'll be okay. If it bothers you, you can always give your holly another coat of Irish moss. So we're going to let that dry brushing dry. And let's go ahead and go to this part of our boot. So we are going to get out some melon. So we're going to work on the, what I'm calling the main shaft of the boot. So you have the pattern on for where our snowmen are going to go. But we want to dry brush some highlighting on, try my dry brush with melon, and it's just going to go through the center area, but you avoid where the snowmen are going to be. Just dry brush all around. Lighten it up. Break up that background a little bit. Anywhere you can get your brush in. And you want to scrub some melon. And I'm sure you can hear that. I really have to scrub to get that paint off my brush. Most of the time. I have some spots where it came off quite easily. But it'll be just fine. There's a lot of stuff on top of this. So let's go ahead and stipple in our snowman heads with warm white. And usually I smoosh snowman, but this guy I just stippled. Just try to keep them fluffy and in a circle. We're going to float some shading up under this cuff. So if you don't get it all the way up to the cuff, it's okay. Tuck the little one in the corner here. And I also tucked a little one down here, but all it gets is snow. It doesn't get anything else. I just thought there would have been one there if it went red all the way. All right. So now we can go on up to our, back up to our holly, and we're going to float a highlight across the top edge of that holly, again with moon yellow. And I guess I should be on camera. And also, you want to highlight the center vein line. And that's going to show up more when we get the shading on. All right. We're going to float shading on the main shaft. And even if it goes over snowman, that's okay. But we're going to do the first float with cranberry wine, which is the color we used first on our candy cane. So all four sides, and you can jump around as you need to. I'm going to go up next to the zigzags for a minute. I'm just going to bounce all over. And yep, you're going to go up under those scallops. But I think I'm going to jump over and go back and float into here. And then I'll go up the back side. Okay, let's go around this, the blue heel. And then the only thing I have left is to go under the scallops. All right. So now we can go back to our holly leaves, and we're going to float shading on the lower edge with black forest green, which you already have out on your palette. It's going to be the lower edge and above the center vein line. And I want to mop that out a little bit. Okay, one more. Now, what I want to do is I want to line a shadow underneath each of those holly leaves with thinned burnt umber. I just want to pop them off the background a little bit, off the cuff. So thin down some burnt umber, and it's just on the underside. You're just going to line that little shadow, more definite shadow. I'm also going to come back with another little float of black forest green. And I always like to float in the bottom of each of the sections of the leaf. So the leaf, the center vein line is a dividing line for it. So I always like to float that back end just to make it tuck itself under our berries. All right, so we have 3 berries. You can stencil them on with the Bubble Buddy. And I do believe, let me check it here, I used, if you're looking at your Bubble Buddy, I used the middle, the third from the right side, third circle from the right side, and those are stenciled on with Country Red, which you have on your palette. And I always like to put one at the top. So much easier than painting in circles. And then I do groups of 3. All right. So the berries need to dry. And while those dry, I'm going to go ahead and float a little bit of burnt umber above the holly leaves. It just didn't look right without a little bit of shading right above the leaves. We don't want the more definite lined shadow. We want to just float a soft one on here to pop them off the background a little bit more. All right, our snowmen need some little cheeks. And now you want to look at your pattern so you can determine which way their noses are going to go. So that will determine where their cheeks are, because they're not necessarily going to be right in this lined up in the center, because it's going to depend on what way the faces face. So grab that handy dandy pattern and then make a wash of melon. We're not gonna dry brush these cheeks on. We're just going to give them like a little wash of melon. And so I'm looking at my pattern here, and this little guy, his nose kind of points up to the left, and so I'm gonna put his little cheeks, and you probably won't be able to see them much because he's in the shadow area. Let's just consider this guy a practice, right? So there, I gave him a couple little cheeks. And then the next guy down, he's kind of the same way. So just a quick little wash of melon to give him some cheeks. Well, to give them all some cheeks. So don't make it a career. They're just little melon-colored cheeks. They don't even have to be perfect circles or anything. That little guy way down in the bottom, he'll get a nose and some eyes probably, but not so much cheeks. And this finally one facing the other way. Okay, and this one, I'll probably give him 2 cheeks, even though one of them will be lost in the shadows. And this guy. So as long as we have melon out, we might as well go back to our berries and add a highlight float of melon to the top of those berries. So I'm going to turn my boot over, and I'm going to add a highlight float to my berries. All right, they look more like berries already. So again, with your liner brush, these snowmen are going to work up really fast. You're going to take some spiced pumpkin, and you want to just paint their little noses on. And now, normally when I paint carrot noses, I go through the whole process of stroking them on and then stroking the highlight on and everything. But these are so little that I'm not even going to bother. I'm just going to kind of squiggle and paint a little spiced pumpkin nose on each of my snowmen. Still want to think like a carrot. And we are going to line a highlight on them, but we're not going to line shading on them. So they're not going to be all that difficult. So just squiggle some little spiced pumpkin noses on your snowman. All right, quick and easy. Think like a snowman and his little carrot nose. Apologize for the neighbor's dogs, but I don't have any control over them. And I'm going to give this guy a little nose just because I can. I painted him there in the corner. We might as well give him a nose. All right, and now I said we were going to line a highlight. We're just going to pick up a little moon yellow on our liner brush and just kind of squiggle a little highlight across the top of each nose. You could make it a straight line if you wanted, but I prefer to squiggle it. Kind of makes him look more raggedy, like a carrot. Told you these guys were quick and easy. Okay. We want to get out some lamp black, or if you can still get into your lamp black. And we're going to give them little eyes and mouth. Eyes and mouths. So the eyes are just going to be little set downs of lamp black. So I just picked up a little blob of lamp black paint, and I'm just going to set down a couple little eyes. And then the mouth is just kind of set down some little dots to give him a mouth. And I think these guys are just too cute. Look at that, aren't they darling? If I say so myself. Okay. Quickest snowman you'll ever build. And this guy right here, he's just got a couple little eyes peeking out over the heel. And this guy, I think I can get some eyes in there. He's just really tucked in that corner. So anyway, now we want to let the, especially the eyes dry, because we do need to come back and add a warm white highlight in there. So while we let that dry, you can crack open your cranberry wine, or if you need fresh, get a little bit of fresh out, and we'll go ahead and float shading on the bottom of those berries, and they're going to get a warm white highlight also, so we can do that at the same time we highlight the eyes. Just try to keep your hands out of your snowman's faces. So I'm just going to give this a quick shading. Right, cool. It's looking more and more like berries. right. While we let this stuff dry, and we have spiced pumpkin out, so if you want to add some orange lights to your tree, you could do that right now. Glad I thought of that. I think I'm going to put another one over here. Right, we almost are ready to highlight lights. We got one more color to pull out. All right, so now I'm going to get out that warm white because I'm looking and I think the eyes on my snowmen are dry enough. So it's just a teeny tiny highlight dot in the top of each eye. Keep it as tiny as you can. Okay. I don't highlight the mouth. That would be a little too much. A little bit more. Not that much, but oh well. And then you also want to go ahead and line that highlight on the berries. And that's more of like a little stroke. All right. So our snowmen, rather than paint bodies on them, I decided I would just go ahead and add a little swirl to kind of act like the body on them. If you don't want to do this, that's fine. But what you need is a liner brush. I'm going to use my tiny one. This is a 6/0. If you have a 10/0, that'd be good. And I'm going to thin down some warm white. And I'm just going to swirl on some what I'm going to call their bodies. So just be very deliberate about and slow about your swirl. There's actually going to be one part of one up here. So I'm just going to give it like the look that there's another one starting up there. And be sure to change the direction that you do your swirl. And I actually just went back and kind of thickened the end of it to make it look like it was a stroke. And you can come back and do that after you get them all done. So let's see, let's do this guy. And this one. So just go around, add some swirls. If they cross over each other, that's okay. It's not perfect. All right, almost there. Okay, I have one more to do. So now I'm going to come back in and I'm going to add those little strokes to the inside edge of each swirl, just to make it look like I was really fancy with it. It just kind of finishes it off too. See if I can keep my hands. Oh, I got my hand in something orange. Must have been, I don't know what, but I did it. Luckily I caught it. Just a couple more to do. Without getting my hands in them. All right. Almost done with this part. So now what you want to do is you want to take some paper, could be your pattern, kind of mask off that the area of the red section, because we want to put some, we want to spatter it with some warm white. So I'm just going to mask it off like this. Little bits of paper here, and then you'll always can clean up anything that goes astray. So I'm just going to thin my paint down, and I just want to add some spatters to that red section. And there's a little bit we need to get down here. Use that. I didn't get this area, so I want to do that. Cool. And now I can just go through. I didn't get very much. I'm just going to clean up. There we go. So we've got the main shaft of the boot done. So let's move on. We're going to go to this, what's called the blue heel counter. And we've already dry brushed the highlighting. So we want to get out some Moody Blue. And we're going to add those little thin stripes. So I think you can see them right here. There's just some little thin stripes. And if you need to put the pattern on, you can. Or you can just wing it. But you want to use a small liner. And surprisingly, I don't line highlighting on these stripes. So I'm going to look at my thing. And I'm going to start in the middle. So I'm just going to pull a line. So if I thin my paint down, stay as straight up and down on my tip of my brush as I can, I should stand a good chance of getting some nice thin lines. Not going to say they're straight, but we've got other stuff going on top of this, so I think it'll be just fine. And I'm going to turn this so I can do the other side. All right, it's looking pretty good. So we're going to let that dry. And while we let that dry, we might as well go to our heel and our sole, heel base and our sole. And let's go ahead and dry brush highlighting on those two places with this Moody Blue. Okay. So I'm just going to go kind of down the center, but leaning a little more to the right. Okay. Kind of like a tornado shape. It's wide at the top and skinnier at the bottom. And on the sole, you just go straight across in this, keep it kind of in the center. And now with this dirty brush, I'm just going to pick up a little warm white, make a lighter value of Moody Blue. I think you can see it on my hand. And I'm going to dry brush a brighter highlight. But this one's going to be a smaller highlight, not quite as wide. And then, since we have lamp black out, let's go ahead and float shading on our heel and on the sole. And so, nice side load float of lamp black. On the sole, I'm just going to go at either end, front and back. And I kind of walk that color across a little bit. Make it a little bit wider float. On the heel, it's going to get all four sides. Okay, so I'm going to turn my little guy. And get all four sides of this. Look at that, you already have the heel done. The heel and the sole. I think we can go back to the heel counter here, and we're going to float shading around every edge with Moody Blue. Okay, it's looking pretty good. I think I will go up the back side. And then we just have to come around the front. All right, so the snowflakes, I just use, you could use any snowflake stencil you want. I had this Tim Holtz stencil. It's called Flurries, and I do have it on my website. I'm just going to stencil some warm white snowflakes on this heel counter. So yeah, just add a little bit more interest to our heel. And like I said, you can use any snowflake stencil you happen to have. I just like this one for this. All right, cool. Loving it. Now I want to make those snowflakes stand out just a little bit more. And so I'm going to take some thinned Moody Blue, and I'm just going to kind of here and there line a little shadow next to parts of the snowflakes. Doesn't have to be every part. Just like I'm kind of keeping it to the left side. And that just helps make those snowflakes stand out just a little bit more. Oops. I got a little snowflake on my heel. Easy enough. I'll just float the lamp black again. Easy fix. So let's just get those little shadows lined on to make our snowflakes stand out just a little bit more. It's amazing what just a little touch of a shadow can do. Okay. It doesn't take much. Glad I didn't put more snowflakes on here. So let's move along. We're going to go to what I'm calling the shank. It's where most of your foot is in the boot. And we are going to add some like faux looking flowers on this thing. And I'm going to use Chris's Floral Friend stencil. Now you could paint these and that would be just fine. But I'm going to look at my pattern. I didn't really put a pattern on for these guys because then you'd have to try to cover it all up. So I'm just going to kind of go here and put little X's where I think I need to put flowers. And that's going to help. Okay, cool. So I'm going to use the largest of the 5-petal flowers on this, and they are going to get stenciled on with Country Red. And now they don't have to be really opaque or anything because there's stuff that goes on top of them. So get out your stencil brush and let's add some flowers. So I know I'm going to have part of one here. cool. And I'm going to have like a whole one over here. Let's do part of one down here. I got a little red on that places it doesn't belong. So if you wanted to, you could always tape off so you don't get any errant stenciling. And then I washed off part of my flower and added some more. There. Let's see. We've got another whole one right in here. And we got part of one over here. And then a little teeny tiny bit of one over here. All right, it's looking pretty good already. So on this Chris's Floral Friend stencil, there's also a little part for leaves. And I used not the largest leaf, but the second largest leaf. And I am going to go ahead and tape off, because those are kind of close together. So I'm going to tape off my stencil so I don't end up with circles and lines and all that stuff. I only want the leaf. All right. So there, I've taped it off so I only get that leaf. And that's going to be stenciled on with Irish moss. And here again, it's up to you where you put them. I'm just going to kind of stick them in here and there around my flowers. So let's get one stuck up in here. And another one over here. And you can put more than one leaf around a flower. It doesn't, there's no right or wrong number. And then let's get part of one over here. And I guess I need part of one over here. All right. And I think I might put one over here, just to fill up that space a little bit more. All right. So now, as long as we are stenciling with Irish moss, we can go ahead and grab our Harlequin stencil, and we are going to stencil on the toe of the shoe with Irish moss. We're going to add this Harlequin. Now you can stencil whatever you'd like on there. I just chose the Harlequin. So just a quick stencil to add those diamonds, not triangles. I guess if you divide it in half, they'd be triangles. Okay, looks good. Let's pop over to this blue stripe and float the top and bottom edge of that blue stripe with Moody Blue. Okay, that looks good. Our flowers that we stenciled on there, we want to go ahead and float on the tips of each of these petals. We want to float a little bit of cranberry wine, just a little sea stroke of cranberry wine on the top of each petal. So now you'll be thankful you didn't put too many flowers on. So the leaves, you want to go ahead and float a highlight across the top of each leaf with Moon Yellow. And what's nice is if you get off the leaf, it's okay, because the background is Moon Yellow. Right, so while we let those leaves dry, let's go ahead and add the little lettering to our blue stripe. Now the stripe does have stitching, not stenciling, stitching top and bottom. So you want to make sure that you leave enough room for that stitching. And if you wanted to, you could do the stitching. I just wrote ho ho ho. You could write whatever your little heart desires. Okay. And let's go ahead and on the toe, let's go ahead and dry brush all over this with warm white. Just want to add the highlight, kind of give it a little dimension. All right, cool. Let's go back to the leaves. We're going to float shading on the bottom with black forest green. All right. Slowly but surely, we will get to the end of this project. Let's go back to our toe, and you're going to float all sides with Irish moss. So I would start my float inside one of the diamonds. This is really going to change the look of the toe a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go this way, get the other side. And then we also need to come right across the bottom there next to the blue stripe. Right, gave it a little bit more dimension by doing that float. So now we are going to go back to our flowers, and I am going to use, taking the tape off, I'm going to use these little like kind of heart-shaped petals for the center of my flowers, and I want to kind of make sure that the tip of this petal is in between some of the other petals. Yeah. So just kind of offset the petals a little bit. And we're going to go ahead and stencil those center petals on with Country Red plus Warm White. I didn't want to use Melon. Melon was a little too corally, so I just picked up some Country Red on my stencil brush and then picked up some Warm White and made a lighter value of Country Red. And if it's not light enough, I can always lighten it up some more. But I just want to add the center of the flower. I think I'm going to put a piece of tape here, just to protect my little flower a little bit more. Okay, so we're just going to go around and add the top layer of petals onto our flowers. And I don't think I can get on that one, so we're not even going to try. All right. Stencil makes it so much easier. All right, so we want to float a highlight on the tips of these petals with Warm White. It's going to be, stick the corner of your brush in there and get a little white on the petals. Probably missed something, but it'll be okay. So while I'm thinking about it, we have that Moody Blue out. We can go ahead and add some blue lights to our string here and there. Don't think we're going to get as many blue lights as we did of the others. All right, so now we can let those dry and then go back and add a little Warm White highlight dot to each one. Okay, so now with those, we're going to float shading at the base of those petals with the cranberry wine. So I'm just kind of pretending like they're little hearts and just kind of tucking like a little C stroke into the bottom of those. And we're going to tap in the center, so don't worry about what the center looks like too terrible much. Right. For some reason this will go a lot faster than the highlight did. If I play my cards right. Okay, let's see, one more here. And one more on that flower. I think it's one more, could be two more. All right, so we just tucked a little bit of cranberry wine down into the center of those petals. Oh, missed one. Right here. So we're going to tap in the centers with a liner brush and lamp black. Just kind of try to keep them round. You see, they're just little tiny dots. And I'm just going to tap them in. Don't fill it up opaque. But it sure does make them look like flowers when you get that center in there. Okay, I need to bring that one a little bit. Oops, too much paint. Higher. All right. Kind of remind me of poppies. And then you just want to pick up a little bit of moon yellow, and not as much as you put in of the black. Just kind of want to tap in a little bit of moon yellow in those centers. Not a whole lot. Okay, cool. So while we let that dry, we are going to go back and deepen the shading on the toe of our shoe with some very well blended out floats of black forest green. I'm going to go about it the same way I did with the Irish moss. And that really adds dimension to that toe. And let's get across this bottom here. Okay. So we have just a few more things to do. If you think you can keep your hands out of the dots, the on the toe at the intersection of each diamond, you want to add a dot of country red. I'm going to go for a little bit smaller dot than that. So wherever there's an intersection, top and bottom, side to side, you want to add a dot. That changes the look of that toe again. All right, so now we have to add some little dots. So I'm going to grab my Bubble Buddy again, and I'm going to choose, I used the one I used for the berries. I'm going to go down one size. And this is just going to get dots of warm white. So if you can get in your warm white still, I might have to get some more. And all I wanted to do was just add some more stuff to the background, wherever I could stick one, just to break up that yellow background. And I want to drag it through those red dots that I wanted you to keep your fingers out of, right? Phew, showing you what not to do. So I need to go back and add those dots back in. Whew. And I'm the teacher. How did we let that happen? Not in the dots, not in the dot set. Finally got away from the dots, so I can just stencil willy-nilly wherever I want. Now, all right, and I don't do anything to those dots. They're just there. So we need to let those dry. We need to let those dots on the toe dry. So we can go ahead and I'm going to get out a little bit more warm white. We can turn our piece over and we can add the highlight dots to the lights on the tree. And they're just a little dot of warm white in the top. So just add to each one. And that just makes them stand out a little bit more. And it doesn't have to take a career. Looks like I kind of drug my hand through that orange too. Learn from me, my friends. And I'm going to go ahead and line the stitching. And that's just thin warm white, the liner brush. You could use a paint pen, but it's a little thicker. I wanted it to be a little thinner, so I'm going to add the stitching to the lower edge of the cuff. And I know stitching is kind of tedious sometimes, but it really does help to for lack of better words, cutesy up this a little bit. And you'll get a rhythm going, so it won't take too terrible long. We can also go ahead and add the stitching to the heel counter, and I only did this inside edge. I didn't do the back side or across the bottom. And let's go ahead and add the stitching down the center of this blue zigzag. Stitching just kind of, like I said, cutesy's it up. It just kind of finishes it. And again, I don't want to get my hands in those dots, so I'm going to turn it around this way. Had enough of getting hands in dots, I hope. All right. We can also do this stitching on the red part, on the shank, and it goes next to the blue. And it also goes, you're going to go next to this, the shank, the yellow shank, and it's going to go across the green and the blue and the red, okay? On the shank of the boot, we want to go ahead and float shading. The first layer is going to be with honey brown. So it's going to go over the flowers, over the leaves, all four sides. So you can just kind of bounce around. So you can get all four sides done. So once that dries, then we will go back and deepen that shading just a little bit with some floats of umber. But while we let that honey brown dry, we can go back to stitching. And there is stitching on this blue stripe, top and bottom. Okay. And there's stitching on the toe right above the blue stripe. And I think my red dots are dry enough that I can go ahead and add a highlight dot to each one. And I do believe that I am going to come back once all of this is dry and deepen this shading with another float of Black Forest Green. Okay, so we can come back to the shank, And we are going to float shading again with some very well blended out burnt umber. So just everywhere you shaded with honey brown, you're going to shade with burnt umber now. Okay, I think I'll go across the bottom. Is this the last place I need to go? I believe it is. Looks so much better when you get that deeper shading on there. So now I am going to come back to my toe and deepen that shading just a touch. And I'll probably have to redo that stitching. Should have deepened the shading before I did that stitching. But it'll be okay, because it's just a little bit of stitching. Yeah, that looks much better. All right, I'm going to pop that stitching back on there, and then we'll give it a look and make sure we have everything done. Okay, so my friends, let's back up and see what we have. I think we have a boot, and it pretty much matches the original boot. So, thanks for joining me, y'all. I appreciate it. I hope you had fun painting this boot with me, and I hope it brings you lots of smiles. To finish this off, of course, you would let it dry, varnish it with a couple of coats of your favorite varnish. I use spray varnish. And then you want to add a wire hanger. And I just had, silly me, I have some decorative Christmas beads. And so I just strung those on the wire. I think I might make it a little shorter. But there you go. You got yourself a Christmas boot. And I hope to see you next month. I don't know what we're painting yet, but it'll be fantastic.